Hi, my name is Karen Darko, and I'm going to review a case study of Airbnb that was published in April 2013 by the Stanford Graduate School of Business. I found it in the Harvard Business Review archives. The goal of this presentation is to demonstrate how the diffusion of innovations theory best explains the widespread adoption of Airbnb. In so doing, we'll also examine how the Technology Acceptance Model, or TAM, a competing technology adoption model, has some interesting applications in this case study, but is not the best model to explain Airbnb's success. I'll begin this analysis by briefly reviewing the diffusion of innovations theory in TAM. Then I'll summarize the Airbnb case study. Next, I'll examine how both these models can be applied to the case study. I'll conclude by showing how the diffusion of innovations theory is the best model for explaining the widespread adoption of Airbnb. This drawing by Tom Fishburne is a fun illustration of the diffusion of innovations theory. As we learn this semester, this theory seeks to explain the process by which an innovation is communicated through certain channels over time among the members of a social system. Fishburne's illustration humorously summarizes the theory, showing it from a brand adoption perspective. Starting on the left, we see that innovators are the first members of the social system to adopt a new product or technology. This is a small but influential group. As adoption spreads, it follows an S-shaped curve where after a small number of system members adopt the innovation, the remaining members adopt the innovation fairly rapidly. We can see this where the curve bulges. The illustration labels the transition to adoption by a large majority as the chasm. I've also seen it referred to as the tipping point. Although some authorities use these terms, and they can be useful ways to look at this theory, I want to point out that Everett Rogers, who popularized the theory, thought early adopters and majorities formed a continuum, and there was no chasm or tipping point. At the end is a period where holdouts or laggards adopt the innovation. I also want to point out the key characteristics of the innovators and early adopters, because this has some bearing on the Airbnb case study. Innovators and early adopters are more likely to have higher educations, higher incomes, and most importantly for this case study, they're more comfortable with risk. Now let's take a look at TAM. This is a competing model of technology adoption that has been in use for more than 20 years. As shown here in Davis's diagram, TAM suggests that users' motivation can be explained by three factors: perceived usefulness, perceived ease of use, and users' attitude toward using. Davis considers the attitude of the user, which is formed primarily by user perceptions, as the key driver that leads the user to accept and use the system or to reject it. User perceptions, in turn, are directly influenced by the design characteristics or features represented here on the left in green as X1, X2, and X3. A key difference between these approaches is that TAM seeks to define users' adoption of a technological innovation by looking at an individual user's relationship and experience with the innovation. Diffusion of innovations, on the other hand, examines the relationship of the innovation within a social system. Now that we've reviewed key points about these approaches to technology and innovation adoption, I'd like to acquaint you with Airbnb. Let me begin by introducing you to Airbnb in case you aren't familiar with it. Officially launching nearly 7 years ago in August 2008, Airbnb is a website that allows anyone in any part of the world to rent out their home or room in their home to someone else. It has over 1 million listings in 34,000 cities and 190 countries. But as we'll see in the Stanford case study, Airbnb hasn't always been this successful. As Sarah Rosenthal and Andrew Rachleff point out in their case study, it took a while for Airbnb to become successful. Their study examines the inspiration for Airbnb as well as early work of company founders to improve users' experience. This retrospective examination is helpful in understanding the technology adoption model that best informs the company's success. The idea for Airbnb came from an event in 2007 when company founders Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia decided to make some extra cash by renting space in their apartment to out-of-town visitors who were in San Francisco for a design conference. The pair built a rudimentary website, shown here, that advertised an airbed and a hot breakfast for $80 per night. Assuming the ad would attract recent college graduates on a tight budget, they were surprised at the response. Instead of cash-strapped students, the pair ended up hosting a 38-year-old woman who worked at Razorfish, an even older industrial designer, and a design researcher. Examining this incident through the lens of diffusion of innovations theory, their original guests can be classified as innovators. They certainly fit the innovator profile. They were highly educated, had good incomes, and were comfortable with risk. As Gebbia explained about their guests, they broke every assumption we ever made about who would stay on an airbed at a stranger's house. This realization inspired Gebbia and Chesky to explore the feasibility of turning their idea into a business. Their initial business model was centered around finding housing for special events, and they targeted the South by Southwest Music and Film Festival as their next business. As you can see, the focus of this early prototype is on finding an event and then finding a place to stay. Airbnb's current site, as you'll recall, focuses on helping travelers find a place to stay when traveling for any reason. Chesky tested this early concept himself by using the site to find a place to stay while attending the South by Southwest Festival. His experience as a guest shed light on a number of ways to improve the user experience. Based on Chesky's experience, they added a number of user enhancements. The most significant feature the team added was a prepayment mechanism. They did this by partnering with PayPal, which then allowed guests to prepay for their stay with a credit card, eliminating the hassle and logistics of a face-to-face transaction. Another enhancement allowed hosts the option of uploading snapshots of the accommodation. The team also created a way for users to book an accommodation so that the entire transaction could take place without the need for multiple phone calls or emails. Finally, the team added a reviews feature that allowed guests to provide a description of their overall experience. Implementing these enhancements, Airbnb officially launched its site August 2008, targeting the Democratic National Convention, which was being held at the end of August. With this incarnation, the site booked 50 reservations. These bookings validated the team's belief that there was a marketplace for this concept. However, after the convention, bookings tapered off, so the team looked toward another event. This time, the January 2009 presidential inauguration, as the next event that could drive traffic to their site. During the inauguration, Airbnb booked 150 reservations as shown in this chart. However, following the inauguration, bookings dropped as they had previously. Even though the team had made substantial enhancements to improve the ease of use, they were unable to achieve sustainable growth. If we are to use TAM to explain the company's growth, this is perplexing. According to this model, Airbnb should have seen expanded growth based on users' perceived ease of use. Let's take a look at the TAM model again. As we reviewed earlier, according to TAM, user perceptions are directly influenced by the design characteristics or features represented on the left in green as X1, X2, and X3. With this understanding, Airbnb should have seen a marked increase in site usage following the introduction of their user enhancements. But as we just learned, bookings did not substantially increase, and Airbnb was unable to achieve sustained growth. For some reason, Airbnb still appealed mostly to innovators and early adopters. How to get more users to adopt Airbnb was the question. But what was the answer for the Airbnb team? To help them solve the puzzle, the team joined a startup incubator in early 2009. The incubator provided seed funding, access to investors, and mentoring to help them refine and launch their idea. Through this incubator, the team had time and resources to tackle a series of decisions around how to improve the product so it could grow into a profitable long-term business. They needed to identify anything and everything that might be impeding growth. One item they gave great consideration to was their target audience. They had heard from numerous people that there still existed a level of discomfort with the concept of hosting or staying with a stranger. But what would boost users' confidence in this area? Ultimately, the team realized that Airbnb experienced the highest repeat bookings for listings that had professionally shot photos on the site. By requiring this feature for all listings, they experienced a huge leap in new and repeat business. As a result, Airbnb is a successful, established company and now offers free professional photography to hosts in many cities. Let's take a look at the diffusion of innovations theory to see how it helps inform Airbnb's success. As we learned, even after the Airbnb team introduced several enhancements to improve ease of use, they were still unable to increase site usage. It was after the team required hosts to post professionally taken photographs that Airbnb was able to attract early majority and late majority users. Unlike the innovators and early adopters, these later users were less risk-averse. Photography was the key to reducing their risk and giving them confidence in the Airbnb experience. It's important to note that adding photographs did not increase the ease of use or perceived usefulness. What it did do was make Airbnb more appealing to early and late majority users by mitigating their level of risk. Reviews by innovators and early adopters also served to reduce their feeling of risk to an acceptable level. This research and facts presented in the Stanford case study make it clear that the diffusion of innovations theory best informs our understanding of Airbnb's success. For more details about the information presented, please consult these works. Thank you so much for taking time to view this presentation. Best of luck to everyone on the